Good to see everyone. How is everyone on this fine day?
Beautiful, isn't it?
Good.
Yeah, we've had like 3 sunny days in a row.
Almost too much to take.
Hi, Gary.
Oh,
Look at that. Are we waiting for anyone else?
You're waiting for staff to log on.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, there's Jordan. Hi, Jordan.
Hi guys, how's everybody?
Good.
I'm just trying to get a hold of her. I do know that she responds. She's not out.
Stop. Simply request right now for campaign
Oh, look, Mike Brown.
requests.org. Now the requests are going to be going on hiatus.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, we were trying to get the codes on here.
Hi, Brandon.
Hello. Looks like we have 3 of our board members.
Yes.
Great. So we're waiting on Kathy. There's Kathy. Perfect. And Eric, our last one we're waiting on, it looks like. Let me check with Eric. Oh, there he is. Perfect.
hello.
Eric.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I believe all of your board members are present.
Okay. I'll go ahead and call the meeting, the special meeting of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea's Historic Resources Board for Friday, September 10th, 2021 to order. Roll call, please, Margie.
Yes, Board Member Croman,
Here.
Board Member Galtieri,
Oh, Catherine's muted.
you're muted.
Oh,
Oh,
she's here, I can hear.
okay. Board Member Hall,
Here.
Board Member Pomeroy. Oh, you're
Muted.
muted also. And Chair Dyer. No. There we go.
Here? Okay.
Okay.
So now is there anyone on the Zoom meeting here that would like to address the board on items that are not on the agenda? One
Okay.
item on the agenda, I think.
And just
Okay.
a reminder for the participants,
So
star 6 on your phone. I know there's a couple that are on their phone, and then star 9 to unmute yourself, or go to the bottom of your screen and you'll see the little microphone. And if there's a slash through it, that means you're muted, or you can go live if you click it.
Better to reach her than phone.
Okay.
And can we remind people that if you're not speaking, please mute?
Also provide.
Absolutely. And we'll mute them on this side also.
And
Okay.
thank you, Board Member Croman. I think the sound, unfortunately, you're hearing there was from Margie's screen, actually, because she's up in the front with Sullivan, who's helping someone at the front counter. So staff will stay muted too unless we have to speak. So that should help as well.
Okay. Our public hearing item is DR 21207 World War I Memorial Plaque. Consideration of a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties for design review, DR 21207 World War I Memorial Arch Plaque for the installation of an additional World War I memorial plaque on a Carmel stone base set in the soil on the west side of the monument located within the median of Ocean Avenue on the east side of San Carlos Street. So is there a staff report? Great.
Thank you, Chair Dyer. So the World War I Memorial, as you mentioned, is located in the median of Ocean Avenue at San Carlos. I'm going to recap scope of the project. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So the World War I Memorial was constructed in 1922. The memorial was designed by Charles Sumner Green and was a gift to the city. The memorial is listed on the local historic inventory, and as such, modifications to the memorial are subject to compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. So the project includes the dedication of a new bronze plaque. The plaque is approximately 14 inches by 16 inches and includes a dedicatory inscription. It also provides some information on the history of the memorial and lists the names of a number of individuals, both those who served in the armed forces, as well as other individuals who contributed their efforts to the war. So as we saw last time, the plaque is proposed to be installed in a planter area, so it won't be directly affixed to the stone monument, but would be installed in a landscaped area mounted on a Carmel stone base, which would be secured to a pole, which would then be secured to the ground. And this is a photo simulation of what the plaque would look like in that landscaped area. This is the view that faces west. So at the August 16th Historic Resources Board meeting, staff presented the project for your consideration. We did go through an analysis of the Secretary standards, and that analysis is included in the resolution that is in your packet. The board asked staff and the applicant to further evaluate the list of the names that are inscribed on the plaque, and then also to look at reducing the size of the plaque without compromising the readability of the inscription. So the applicant did provide some supplemental information that's included as attachment 5 to your staff report. Staff also received some written public comments, which have been forwarded to the board. In summary, the comments recommend that the names on the plaque be limited to veterans only. And there was another public comment about the legalities of modifying the monument, and staff did reach out to the city attorney regarding this. And in his opinion, the plaque is consistent with the purpose of the gift from Mr. Green, since it would be commemorating those who served in the war. And he did not find any reason why the plaque could not be installed in the planter area. So with that, staff's recommendation is that the board adopt a resolution issuing the determination of consistency. And it is at your discretion what the inscription on the plaque ultimately reads, but staff has found that the placement of the plaque is consistent with the Secretary's standards. I do apologize. I did miss in the resolution changing the signatory block, but I assure you that we will correct that before the final resolution is signed. With that, it completes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Marnie. Any questions of Marnie by the board? Okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing, and we'll first go to the applicant or applicant's representative. And I believe that the applicant is Mr. Kreitman.
Yes, the applicant actually was the, is the American Legion Post, and I was acting.
Okay.
Then we have Jerry Paratori, the commander of the American Legion, speaking.
Okay.
So how do I share? Here it says share screen. Okay. So I'm just going to speak to trying to shrink the plaque down, which you asked me to do, us to do, and I agree with you. I agree that the mock-up, interestingly enough, the mock-up that Marnie just showed, which was previous, actually that's very close to where I expect the scale of the thing to be now. Here's a picture. Let's see if this comes up. Wait a moment. Okay, can everyone see this? So the one on the right is what we looked at, and the big one. And the one on the left is actually is an attempt to shrink it down, also to make sure all of the type has to be at least 18 point, it turns out, for sand casting, which is what they do. So we managed to shrink it down and get it all in a much smaller footprint. However, if you look at this, it's very tight. And you asked us to try to get it to 80% of the original area. And this actually takes it below that. But all in all, let me just go to the, so we, in order to get a little more, okay, and this is what it would look like. And that's why it's quite, as I said, it to get it in, it made it a lot more, just too tight. So there's, so this was my last, oh, is, can you, no, I'm sorry.
There you go.
That one you've seen. I wanted you to see this one. Can you see this? It's a Word document.
Not seeing a Word document. I see the two
side by side.
Side by side.
Richard, you may want to try stopping sharing your screen and then re-sharing and selecting the document you want to share.
Okay, let me start that then. Share screen and there we go. You got that?
Yes, I see that.
Okay, so you can see in this one, we took out the sort of the country, the and between sort of their country, and add a little bit of space. This would get us about halfway between the original and the squished one that I showed you. Unfortunately, something with Word and columns, I can't seem to bring up, I guess you can see my cursor. I'm having a hard time bringing this up, but we will. The actual size of the plaque will be this outside black line because that will be the edge of the plaque and it's always a raised border. This will get us to about somewhere 85% and it'll be square, and I think it's the best we can do. So that's that. Also, I know in terms of the text and how we title this, and I know there was some confusion or some question about it. I'm agnostic on this. We could call it the World War I Veterans Monument. And then in the text, the cornerstone for this World War I memorial, because it's a monument that serves as a memorial. It's certainly a monument. That's what it physically is. If the board has a preference to that, that would be fine.
Okay. Well, I think, can I ask, I just want to ask a question, Richard. So it says at the top, World War I Veterans Memorial. And is that, I guess there seems to be a real issue with the word veterans. So was that, where does the word veterans come from? I didn't necessarily see it in the original Pinecone articles and things, but I may be.
Oh, it was, I'm sorry, it was on the, and if I can get back to that, the original document by Charles Sumner Green, the drawings, the front piece of that, and that was in your packet, what I originally sent, the original Word document.
Mhm.
He called it World War I. He used the word memorial. In terms of veterans, it has two definitions. One, it is in honor of the veterans, and also it was built by, paid for, and essentially owned by the veterans. So it's both ownership and honoring. The veterans of World War I are the ones who held the dances at the I forget the name, the community hall, who raised the money, who were responsible for it getting built. And this group, it was the community club. Ian will correct me if I get the names wrong. But the group that did it became the founders of American Legion Post 512. They were in an American Legion Post in 1921. And so I see it as that. It's both
So it's,
the veterans and has.
so it's you're naming it the Veterans Memorial.
As I said, I'm agnostic. We could call it the monument if you wish. And
Okay, that's just, I think, an issue we're going to have to discuss as the meeting goes forward. So,
yeah, Ian has a comment on that.
okay, are you ready to? Are you finished with your testimony, Richard?
Well, no. Let me see. Yeah, it was just that. We'll do our best to, I took some wordage out of the text in order to get us to be able to shrink the document to shrink the plaque to the size that you asked for, and that's going to be more attractive and more to scale for that planter box. And that's basically it. I don't think I have any more. This is what we've come up with in terms of shrinking it, changing it around. This is the typeface and the 18-point essentially it's a 1/4 inch is the smallest they could do. An 18-point type is essentially a 1/4 inch.
And I guess my only question on that is, I noticed it seems like maybe the font changed from one to the other, and this seems to have bold. It may be easier with more of a plain type, because it
would be fun. I'm going to try it. I would have. That's something I would talk to the plaque makers about. I think the bold is easier for them to cast. The thinner type.
It's harder. Okay.
Yeah, it's harder. And we'll do our best. I haven't let you down before. The bell with the bell and the bell bracket. We'll do. I think it'll be fine.
I have a question.
I'll follow you.
Okay. I know we're going to be discussing later, including the Red Cross and all of those as another issue. At the top it says, "In memory of those who died in that service," which leads you to believe that all these people died in that service. Actually, none of them, from what I understand, died in that service. Is that correct?
If you would read the paragraph below, it says that.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Say, in honor of men and women.
All came home alive. Okay, it just seems like a contradiction. Okay.
Well, and as Ian has pointed out, every war monument is indeed a memorial. And though our people came home alive, many of the comrades did not. Mm-hmm. And so for those veterans, it was a memorial also, not to the dead of Carmel, but to those who died. Okay. And then what we're saying is, in that paragraph, it now honors all those from Carmel who served our country and stands as a memorial to all those who died in that service. So.
Richard, have you done a mock-up with only the military names and how those fit in?
All right. No, I haven't, and they would fit.
One second, let's Richard start, and we'll go to Ian next. Go ahead.
I have not, and of course they would fit. They fit easier than these do. So.
And would you be able to reduce the size of the plaque further to get to that 20% reduction if you only included the military names?
Possibly, probably.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. I'll go on to Ian.
All right, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time to have the second meeting here to consider this matter. And I'm sorry I was not at the meeting originally last time. I think I could have cleared up a lot of confusion about the nature of this list and the presence of these civilian names. And I want to make it very clear, this is not a list that we came up with today. This is the list that the Carmel community came up with a century ago as to who they felt should be remembered for their service in the war. And yes, it does include a list of a handful of civilian people. And I'd like to go ahead and read now something that speaks directly to the decision that the community made. And this is on the front page of the December 5th, 1918 pine cone, all right? So World War I, or what they knew as the Great War, had not even ended, a month ago when this article came out. But already they're considering who from the community should be remembered for what they did in that war, right? And so a committee was brought together of distinguished people to decide who should be on this list, right? And chief among them was a physician named C.A. McCollum, who we understand was on the exemption board. So he would be reviewing the people who were, drafted. He's in a very good position to understand who went, who did not go, and who should be on the list or not. And so this article in the December 1918 pine cone is kind of an update as to the status of the evolution of the list. And so I'm going to read you verbatim what the pine cone says. The task of the committee, and that's the committee assembling the list, has not been and is not now a light one. And though the work is well underway, there remains much to do. In gathering data concerning the men who were drafted, enlisted, went to the front, went overseas, the engagements they were in the period of service, etc. There is considerable work ahead. And then, and this is important, then too, the project has been considerably expanded. It was at first intended that the honor roll include only those in the Army and Navy. Now it is proposed to include those engaged in overseas Red Cross and similar work, war correspondence, etc. And obviously this is what the direction the community did, because I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Wish me luck. All right. All right, hang on. I guess I got to, gee. All right, okay. Quit now. All right, let's see. Later. All right. I've not shared with Zoom before.
Down at the bottom, Ian.
Yep, I know I see that, but it's my computer's asking me to do this whole permissions thing. Here we go. Okay, share. Boom. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, great. So this is the November 10th, 1921 Carmel pine cone. It is the day before Armistice Day, the day before the cornerstone for the World War I Memorial is going to be laid with a huge community celebration. And on the front page, there's a proclamation declaring that Armistice Day was going to be a holiday, and it was to remember the service of the people who were involved in the war. And then down below here, importantly, you've got this list titled Those Who Served. And on the left here, we've got the column Army and Navy. And on the right here at the bottom, you have another part, and it says Auxiliary Service, right? And here are the names of a few civilians. You have Theodore Criley, he was a YMCA volunteer. You've got John Northern Hilliard, who I don't remember what he did. James Hopper was a war correspondent for Collier's magazine. John Galen Howard, Red Cross, went to France, worked with resettling refugees. Talbot Jocelyn, another YMCA volunteer. Vernon Kellogg, impressively, was the director of the Commission for Relief in Belgium in Europe. Herbert Hoover, of course, is the overall director, but Vernon Kellogg was in charge of the effort there in Belgium and northern France. James Redford Mason, I think it was Knights of Columbus, Perry Newberry, YMCA, went to France, was embedded with the 304th Field Artillery, went through poison gas attacks, and was beloved by that unit. And the unit did not delineate between themselves being in the Army and him being in the YMCA. They considered him an integral part of their unit, and they said so in the unit history, which Newberry has mentioned extensively. So we have this list, right? And we also have another list. Can you see this now?
Yeah,
This
we see
black-
that.
I see the original list.
You see the, right, or do you see the pine cone now, or you see this other thing?
I see the
Pine cone still.
Oh, gee, all right, let me see if I can figure out how to, all right, I'll stop
May
sharing.
have to do what I did, stop it. and
Okay,
start.
so let me do this. Boom, okay, can you see this now?
Yes,
Okay, terrific. Now, this is one of the great mysteries of Carmel-by-the-Sea, because this is a hand-carved plaque, personally carved by Charles Sumner Green, right? It was referred to in the 1918 article I read previously, and it is a list of not only those names that we saw in the pine cone just now, but we also see a number of other names too, including significantly the service of women. The Pinecone list doesn't have any women listed, but with this list here, we learned that Army Nurse Grace Bean served. We learned that Charlotte Kellogg, who was married to Vernon Kellogg, she was also in the Commission for Belgian Relief, and also Charlotte Kett, who was a Red Cross volunteer who also went to France. And this, the last documented sighting of this list was in 1943. It was profiled in the Carmel Pinecone, and the Pinecone describes this list and a little bit of its history. And through this list, we can learn a little more specificity who did what during the war. So, for example, it says, James Hopper, war correspondent, spells it out, whereas the Pinecone list just used the auxiliary service thing under those who served for the civilians. So anyway, once again, this is a list that I did not come up with. Richard did not come up with this list. No one alive today came up with this list. This is simply the list that the community of 100 years ago said, these people need to be remembered for what they did during the Great War, right? And so we see this plaque as an opportunity to resurface their names in connection of what their contributions were to the war effort. And that's all we're doing here, right? It was not my idea to add any of these civilian names, or was it Richard's? Once again, it was the community's desire to remember these names, right? And that's why they put this list together. And I would be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
I have a couple questions. So just to clarify, if we go back to the image you had of Charles Sumner Green's plaque,
sure.
The names on that plaque, because that's the all-inclusive list, those are the names that are on the proposed plaque that
yes.
American Legion Post is
verbatim, without changes, without edits. We are simply transcribing this list onto the plaque that we're proposing.
And I'm not sure you were there. This hung on the wall of City Hall from 1921 through 1943, as well as we know.
And just to clarify, I had a question about just the title of the plaque, Roll of Honor Carmelo Precinct. That's just
right. So the Carmelo Precinct included Pebble Beach, Carmel Valley, the Highlands, and Big Sur. Like Jaime d'Angulo, who's all listed here, he had a ranch down on what is now called Partington Ridge in Big Sur. So it was so basically the Carmel area is who remembers the people from the Carmel area.
Okay, and then what is your viewpoint of the word veteran on the plaque itself? I understand the way Richard was explaining that the veterans and the American Legion Post were very much involved in having the memorial built, but is it a World War I memorial arch, or is it a World War I Veterans Memorial Arch? I mean, I think
all right, so the our World War I memorial is fairly universal. The explicit purpose of it, according to the language, Charles Sumner Green inscribed on the memorial, the language you see in the pine cone is simply to those who served, right? And the definition of those who served are the people on this list here, right? And but it is a universal. It is a universal reminder, a universal form of remembrance. We've seen references to people remembering their fallen comrades relating to the memorial. So, like any great symbol, like any great public form of remembrance, it takes on broader meaning, right? Specifically, it's supposed to be dedicated to those who served, and the list here on your screen before you are the people that it specifically is meant to preserve the memories of.
Okay, and then in the documents you've read, the older Pinecone articles and all the documents you have in the Green Archives, how do they describe the arch? Do they use the word veteran, or do they just use World War I Memorial Arch?
They describe it as the memorial fountain. They don't use the term veteran. They simply say to those who served, right? So that's the word they use.
Okay, that's what I wanted to kind of clear up a little bit. Okay, is there any other board members that have questions of Richard or Ian? And I'll open up to the rest of the public.
And Chair Dyer, I would hope you could indulge me to just have a couple minutes to clarify, if necessary, some of the history here. I think that there's a lot of confusion that's been created about the nature of the list and the background where the list comes from. So I hope I can, for the sake of.
Okay, I'll let you, respond at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board, however, of the applicants? Okay, hearing none, I will continue with the public hearing. Margie, do you want to go ahead and call the next person who raises their hand?
Mr. Jerry Paratori, just unmute and you're ready to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for having this meeting, this extra meeting to discuss this. I'm the current post commander at 512. I'd like to say that the post, not in total because everybody hasn't voted, but we did discuss this at the executive committee. That was post the email that you got from Ernie Baber, and at the executive committee, we voted unanimously to support the inclusive list. This was also brought to the general meeting on the 6th and discussed with no dissension. And so I think that the post 512 is fully prepared to support the inclusive list. I just wanted to put that in for you, let you know that we've been involved with some of the planning and we've had some discussions, and that's all I have to say, other than, again, thank you for having this extra meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jerry, can I ask how many people are in the executive committee that voted in favor and how many people were at your general meeting that voted in favor? I think you're still muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
There you go. I got caught up to myself. We had 7 of 9 at the executive committee, and it was no dissenting votes. So everybody voted to support this. The general meeting had we had 9 people at the meeting, and there was nobody that had an issue with it at the meeting.
And how many people are in the post, members of the post?
Well, the post has got 100+ folks, but we regularly have 9 to 15 people show up at the meeting. So like I mentioned earlier, it's not unanimous because not everybody was there, but nobody had concerns enough, and it was posted to everyone. So nobody had a concern enough to log in and voice. anything.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address the board?
Could I just, Jerry, I think.
Sorry, Richard, I'm going to continue going on with the other ones, and then we'll come back to you and Ian to respond.
Yeah, I don't see any hands up. If anybody is calling in and they'd like to address the board, please do so now. Oh, okay, we do have one that came up, starting with, or the last numbers of 310. Go ahead.
Sue McLeod. This is a very complicated subject, and it's setting all kinds of precedent. What we're talking about here is, I was really floored to hear you say in the last few comments that it isn't just Carmel-by-the-Sea or residents, and that sets a precedent. Where Devendorf Park has been sort of limited to remembering the people who have given their lives. We had a big, as the Brits would say, controversy over the adding of the piece of steel from the 9/11 disaster, when that was added to, expanded and added to the to Devendorf Park. So this is a memorial, and if all the names that you've been discussing, even if they were just all Carmel-by-the-Sea residents, something happened and no one went forward with anything, and here we are, as Ian was saying, 100 years later, trying to put the genie back in the bottle. Having spent my life on the front lines of some of the disasters that we've talked about recently, I really feel very strongly that we're making a huge mistake by talking beyond those who were active duty. And that's what the memorials in Devendorf currently are. So if you're going to start something else, it's going to change the tone of the park as well. And I think this needs a lot more public discussion and input than you've got. And you really need to be able to answer the question, why did it never materialize, as with the material that Ian has been talking about in the Pinecone? The idea and the definitions of memorial, all, when you look in the dictionary, all have death related to them. And I think it belittles the work of those who served and gave their lives to do what you're talking about doing. Certainly, those others can be recognized if you so desire, but the fact that it never went forward, I think, is very significant. And I really would urge you to stop and think twice about all that you're about to put into play. And I certainly would see it going to council and having to be discussed at the council level, because it is a major change.
I want to make clear.
Wait, Ian, I'll let you respond at the end. Just make note of how you want to respond to each of the people that speaks. So Sue, can I ask a question of you?
Who am I talking to?
This is the chair, Eric.
Oh, hi, Eric. No.
Hi there. So I'm trying to understand your position. It sounded like your position was that no plaque should occur because none was ever done, and none of these people were, actually died in the war. Or are you supporting just the veterans' names being placed on there and not any of the auxiliary services?
The 56 people who already are part of the memorial that served active duty are what I'm supporting, not anything else. Okay. I mean, I can go back to sitting at Sunset School as a kid during World War II and the things we sent overseas. So are we going to do something for World War II and the kids who went to school and worked and sent things to the people overseas? Are we going to get recognized? I certainly hope not.
Okay, thank you.
So can I ask a couple questions, please?
Of course.
This is Jordan. So you found a reference to Charles Sumner Green, who talked about the 56 men who left Carmel to fight in the First World War. And, that's kind of a reference that you found and felt was very significant coming from the person who provided that gift. And it was a gift to the city that he gave, and how, A, that was his intent, and then B, how changing the gift can be very problematic, and we really, as a city or as recipients of a gift, really don't have the right to do that. So can you talk about those two things at all, please?
Is that to me? Was that addressed to me, or?
Yes, ma'am. That was.
Okay, George. Well, you said it, what I would have said. I have nothing more than that to say. I never discussed 56 people directly with Charles Sumner Green, and as I've tried to run it down by talking to Don Goodhue, who lived across the street, I was hoping maybe he'd had a conversation, architect to architect, that could shed some light on this, but that didn't materialize. But I'm only going with what's in the book about this gift, and quoting the figures from Sharon Witchamadudi's book of Carmel and the history. What was your second part of your second question, Jordan?
If you could just, if you had any thoughts on, changing, if a gift is given, changing the intent of that gift.
Yeah, I don't know what's on the city's policy list. The process that we used to go through, and I just don't know where that is today, was pretty specific. And I don't even know if the plaque is still in the lobby of City Hall, where these gifts were approved, were put up on the plaque. I don't know if that is still there. I haven't registered on it recently. So I can't say what the policy is. But there was a firm policy about accepting gifts, sort of what the process was to do that, and there was a dollar value also as to when they would be recognized. I mean, $5 versus $5,000. But that was from my personal knowledge, but I don't know if that's been changed. And I don't have any idea what policy was on the books back at the time of World War I.
Okay. Any other questions of Sue from the board?
Just one thought, though. Obviously, there was some approval of the process by which the monument was built.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address the board on this agenda that has not spoken already? Okay, seeing none, I will bring it back and let Ian or Richard respond to anything they heard.
Well, a couple of things.
Who would you like to go first?
Go ahead, Ian.
Okay, cool. No, I greatly appreciate Mayor McLeod's points. This is not something that's trivial or not something to be taken lightly or on a whim. But again, this is the list. Actually, they did go forward with it. This list was, hand carved by Charles Sumner Green, and according to the pine cone, it used to hang in City Hall. God only knows what became of the list. It's one of those amazing mysteries, but it wasn't. They did execute the list, and it was indeed hanging in City Hall. So something did become of the list, and then most of the list appeared in 1921 in the Carmel pine cone, as I mentioned earlier, and it's the November 10th, 1921 pine cone. You can see it on the front page. And that list the pinecone list has 54 names, several of which are civilians. And then the one in City Hall that was hand carved by Charles Sumner Green has 61 names. I've not seen a list that has 56 names. But as far as I know, you cannot get anywhere near 54, 56, or 61 names without the addition of civilian names. Of any list I've seen, I've only seen two lists, and those are both primary sources, the lists themselves as they appeared in their original form, again, as primary sources, the pinecone list of 1921 and the City Hall list, those hand carved by Charles Sumner Green. I also want to take a moment to discuss the idea that Charles Sumner Green gifted the memorial to the city. I want to clarify something. There was no discussion that I've been able to find about the memorial being gifted to the city. The only documentation we have of the city's involvement in the construction of the memorial was in October 1921, when the community club said, hey, we want to replace the watering trough on Ocean Avenue with a war memorial, right? That was the only approval process. There was no discussion of who was going to own the memorial, who was going to take care of it. It was simply, hey, can we build the memorial on Ocean Avenue? And the city, the Board of Trustees, as it was then known, said yes. And then the other part of the other documentation we've had of the city's involvement was in 1924 when the board.
This is for the telephone, right? To do it on the telephone?
Please mute yourself there.
The other part we.
Hello?
Whoops, what happened?
Ian, you're muted.
Ian, you're muted. You better unmute yourself.
Okay, darn. How much did anyway? So did you get the part where city approved the location of the war memorial, but there's no discussion of who would own it or maintain it? All right, and Charles Sumner Green donated his design and he donated his construction management, right? There was a Scottish stone cutter by the name of Willie McMichael. He was hired to build the memorial along with a few other stone cutters, but the money was raised by the community largely under the leadership of the American Legion, especially Argyle Campbell. So there was no gift per se by Charles Sumner Green of the memorial in its entirety. A lot of different individuals all made contributions collectively to create the memorial, but there was no formal process of gifting it to the city. That's also a very important point as well. So in short, this is what the community wanted to do 100 years ago. This is what the community said. The community came up with this list, a century ago of the people they felt should be remembered for their service, and that's certainly a different process than obviously what happened in the subsequent wars, which are memorialized over in Devendorf Park. As far as we can tell, it is true what the 1943 Pine Cone says, in that everybody involved in Carmel-by-the-Sea who went overseas in the war did come home alive. And as far as we can tell, that does seem to be the case, which of course is quite different from the tragic outcomes of the subsequent wars that are memorialized in Devendorf Park. So I hope that that provides a little bit of clarity. And again, as to Mayor McLeod's point, this is not something we're doing on a whim. This is not something that we want to trivialize at all, but we want to resurface the desires of the community from 100 years ago about who they felt should be remembered for their service in what they called the Great War.
Okay, thank you. With that, is there any other?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Hello?
Catherine?
Mr. Chairman?
Catherine, go ahead.
I wanted to ask Ian a question. Ian, could you speak about the small plaque that used to be on the back of the war memorial that said, "To those who served"? How does that fit into this?
Sure. So currently, there are only two plaques that were ever installed on the war memorial. One was installed in June of 1964 by the American Legion Post 512. There was concern that people were forgetting the purpose of the memorial there on Ocean Avenue. And before the American Legion installed that plaque, there was no outward indication as to what purpose that structure served, right? And so we have in the Carmel Pine Cone from 1964 saying the American Legion is putting this plaque there because people were forgetting why there's this stone monument on Ocean Avenue. And then the other little plaque that that is immediately below that 1964 plaque is simply a rededication when the memorial was rebuilt in 1977 after it was largely knocked over by a car crash.
And let me also respond. To those who served was indicated in Mr. Green's original drawings. And if you'd like, I could put that up on the screen.
No, I think we've seen it.
Yeah,
I know the one you mean.
Yeah,
Okay, but it was never placed. It was just, and he indicated it to be carved into the stone itself. That's what it looks like.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else before I close the public hearing?
I think Mike
Yes.
Brown is trying to speak.
Yeah, I've been,
Mike, go ahead. Mike,
Mike Brown?
The floor is yours if you want to speak.
You need to unmute yourself, Mike.
is that,
There you
am I
go.
unmuted?
Yes.
Hear you now.
Okay, great. Okay, let me just say that this, God, I'm getting a feedback here. Anyway, let's see what looking at this plaque, it's too wordy. It should, everything from post 1921, the information is not needed and not appropriate. Now, Brian McEldowney and myself started this whole project over 20 years ago, trying to restore this monument. During that time, it's just a long story, and if anybody would care to call me, and I'd be happy to explain to you all that went on to try to get it to the point it is at now. Ian and Richard are interested, and it's nice what they're trying to put together here, but they're the newcomers on this whole thing. They just stepped up to the plate in the last few years and haven't kept in touch with those of us who are really involved in it. The names, what should be on this plaque, if there's going to be a plaque, is just the name of the veterans. I'm a veteran myself, and either no plaque and then put all this information down at City Hall, which is where it was forwarded to originally, or if you're going to have a plaque, then just list those men, and well, in this case, just men, I guess, that went over across the pond and served during the First World War. This, I think Sue, from what I could hear, would say, made a very clear and concise presentation to you. I hope you listened to what she had to say. And this whole thing, not a plaque, or just list those who served. Now, there's other people's names that are on it. We weren't there in 1921 to know how they got on, what was all involved in their being. But we do know those that served, and those are the names I think should be really recognized. Unfortunately, this is a subject I could go on and on and on about, and I don't want to hold the floor, so I'll just unmute myself and then maybe come back in the future, in another time. But please, let's not make this, what we're seeing, first of all, is it recess printed or it's etching? If it's etching, it won't last. It won't be there for long. Recess printing is the only way anything's going to last. I think it's almost in the way, if people want to take photographs and everything of it from a distance, this plaque is in the way. Let me say, either no plaque and do everything, but put it back to where it was down at City Hall, or if you're going to have a plaque, those who served. Those are the true veterans. These other names, they were on the credit card, if I can use a contemporary word. They were on a credit card. The veterans, they stepped up to the plate and went and served. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Anyone else wishing to address the board on this application?
We have both Ian and Richard with their hands up again.
Okay, go ahead, Ian.
Actually, I'd like to respond to a few things. One, yes, Mayor McLeod. Well, it didn't go.
Richard, I think the chair called on Ian. Mr. Chair, did you want to have Ian Martin go first?
Sure, go ahead and.
Just a point of historical clarification. If we were only going to honor the people who actually went to Europe, you'd maybe have like 20 or 25 names total. Most people on the list of 61 did not go to Europe.
Okay. And Richard, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that most of the Army and Navy names did not deploy overseas. Every single one of the civilian names, Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, every single one of the, we're not sure. Most of the civilian names we know were overseas. Some were in combat, some like, Perry Newberry were actually gassed. So just to respond, and to respond to Mayor McLeod, yes, well, the bell didn't go forward, though it was designed by Charles Sumner Green, because apparently the community, after working hard to raise the funds to build the monument, they didn't have funds. They didn't raise money for the bell that he designed. In 1966, a bell was donated by Sir Harry Downey, and then in 2016, we replaced that with this town centennial bell done to Mr. Green's design. This plaque, the intention was to provide a historical plaque in front of this singular monument in town. As historical plaques are encouraged to be placed by monuments to explain to the public, to people who walk up, what this is about, why it's here. And that's what we have tried to accomplish. And since we have these names going back to whom the community wished to honor for their service in 1918, 1921, and beyond, so essentially, yes, this was a historic plaque, to an informational plaque, a dedicatory plaque. And now, because it's the 100th anniversary in November of the laying of the cornerstone, we've completed this wonderful, and Mike, thank you so much, and thank Brian McEldowney for your work on getting the stone and getting the stones replaced, which should put us in good stead for the next 100 years for this monument. You've approved other things with irrigation, bollards, chains. And so the point of this was to provide an informational, dedicatory, historic plaque. And since we have the names of all these people who were honored by the community,
yep.
and it looks like we can fit them on a plaque, that was the intention.
Okay.
And it is something new. It is. There was no historical plaque, and you know, I mean, it won't be visible unless you walk up to the monument, look inside. It's not visible.
Okay. Thank you, Richard.
And,
I think we got most of your points. Is there anyone else on the Zoom call that would like to address the board on this issue before I close the public hearing? Sue has already spoken, but if you'd like to speak, go ahead, Sue. If not, I can't hear.
Mayor McLeod does have her hand up, but I think it would be good to hear from her.
Sue, you're muted. You need to *6 on your phone.
You'll get a copy of the receipt emailed to you on.
Okay, I don't know if she knows she wants to speak or not, but she has spoken before. So I think the board has the general sentiment of the people that spoke. There's no one else?
Are you there?
Oh, there you are. Mayor, would you like to add something?
Can I go ahead just for a second?
Sure, go ahead.
My concern, and as I started to say, Catherine may wish to weigh in. I don't want to put her on the spot, but she's in the business of, in her former job as a state historic preservation officer, of how you document things. But, you know, we're basing information and making some major changes based on newspaper articles. And you know, I don't know what these people did or who they were. I lived one door away from Talbot Jocelyn. I never, of course, had any conversation with him other than about his photography. But it just bothers me that people, when you go into the military, and I'm sure I'm talking to people who've been in the active military, but yes, you have people who don't go overseas, but that doesn't mean that you can look at the deaths we read about training exercises off the coast of California or planes that go down. For heaven's sakes, once you're in the military, you're not sitting at home by the telephone, drinking a beer or something. I think that's really specious. So please, let's be, I'm not trying to denigrate the work that's been done, but I don't think it has risen to the level of which it should be honored. I think we're lowering those who were the 56, or that's the number that's in the book. I can only cite that for the source, but we really need to stick with the facts, and those as primary facts and certifiable. I don't see sitting to go this step forward.
Thank you. Final call for anyone who wants to address the board on this issue, someone who has not spoken. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for comments, questions.
Mr. Chair, since Mayor McLeod called my name, I would like to start first.
Sure, go ahead.
And I would have to say that she's right. I started in historic preservation in 1967 with the State Historical Landmarks Program. And all of you have seen the bronze plaques throughout California that the state wishes to honor historic sites, objects, battles, buildings, and of architectural merit, et cetera. There are over 1,000 now. I'm sure they've gone way up since I retired. What we used to document and record the history that went along with designating those historical landmarks were primary sources, such as the ones that Ian Martin has chosen to give us. I would have to say that the record from the earliest Carmel pine cones would be more accurate than a 1980 history of Carmel that was written, yes, 40 years ago, but way past the time of the creation of this monument. So I do believe that the pine cone records, the records that we have from Charles Sumner Green's part of this, are significant enough, and I would almost wonder if this could qualify as a state historical landmark due to its significance with the architect and the history connected to it. So I do support keeping the list of names that are from the historical record that are provided by the applicants. I think that confirms that the arch was not only to memorialize veterans and those who had died in service to their country, but also it was to honor the sacrifices that all of those made who participated in the war effort. And that might be unusual to veterans and unusual to people who say, why include civilians? But if that is in the 1921, 1918 accounts, then you can bet they were thinking that way. And that provides me with the assurance that we're not just making this up. Also, I think recognizing the Carmel Roll of Honor as envisioned by the individuals who were living here at the time is appropriate. So I've heard all the arguments, I've read all the material, and I certainly respect the opinions of all of us, and that's what makes Carmel so unique and a wonderful place to live. We can all express ourselves freely. But I think we have to look at the historical record and realize that This is not a typical war memorial such as the ones in Devendorf Park. This is a monument to honor those who served, as evidenced by what Charles Sumner Green had in his mind, and also the Board of Trustees in 1921. And there, I do have the minutes of the meeting of the Board of Trustees from that November 11th. And the communication that came into the board, the City Board of Trustees, from the community club requesting permission to lay the cornerstone of a proposed memorial was read along with a sketch of the memorial, and the request was granted. So to my mind, we have the record and we should support what the community asked for originally.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Next, another board member would like to speak is Kathy or?
I'll speak.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm in favor of inclusivity and including all of the names. Number one, women didn't get recognized back then very often, and they were back home or in different places being nurses or whatever, but they got very little recognition. I'd like to see a token woman get some recognition. War correspondents, they are out there, you know, informing all the rest of us of what's going on out there. They've been killed, you know, doing their job. They're in danger just like the soldiers are. And I've been a Red Cross volunteer for several years. I went out on disaster. And especially, I'm thinking right after 9/11, the Red Cross set up a respite center for the people who were digging. And they were right there at Ground Zero. They were set up in a nearby hotel. They were breathing the same bad air. They were providing comfort for those that were serving and risking their lives. And I just think it's important to include all those people.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Carol, do you have any comments? Carol's on the...
Carol, you're muted.
There you go.
Thank you. I have 3 comments. One is I would change the wording to those who served, not just veterans. Second, I would include the 61 names that Green had on his plaque, that he etched on his plaque, because I think it's important that we honor who he wanted to honor. I don't know what happened. There were 56 plus 5. I don't know who those 5 were, but I think we should stick with what he gave us. And number 3, I would remove all of the descriptors about YMCA and Knights of Columbus and all that, and just call it auxiliary services. You know, have the Army, Navy, et cetera, for the veterans, and then just auxiliary services, and list those names, whichever ones were on the green plaque. That's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carol. Jordan, would you like to say a few words?
I would, thank you.
A lot of words.
Yeah, probably a lot of words. So I really appreciate all the different viewpoints that have been brought here and the historical or semi-historical or even non-historical contents and desires that we've talked about today. Here's what I'd like to say though. Let's start by a couple definitions. There's a difference between a memorial and a monument. And if you look at the dictionary and all kinds of different things, what you see as a commonality is that a memorial is often a service or a remembrance or a commemoration. It can be a physical building, but it doesn't have to be. A monument is almost entirely always a structure built to commemorate an event or for symbolic reasons. And if we look at this structure, it's clearly both a monument and a memorial, which is often the case. A monument is often a memorial does not have to be a monument. We've talked about all these people and all these different plaques and all these different names. But if you look at the plaque that's on the memorial, on the monument, it says, "This memorial is dedicated to the men of Carmel who responded to their country's call during World War I." It doesn't talk about men and women. It doesn't talk about war correspondents. It doesn't talk about Knights of Columbus. It talks about the men of Carmel. And at that time and era, only men were called to serve in the armed forces. So it's very clear when that plaque was posted that it was posted for the men, the service men of Carmel who responded to their country's call. It's also very clear that there was a desire by our community to honor all those who participated in the war effort, because all their activities and all their efforts and everything were, I'm sure, greatly appreciated and had a lot of great things. And, if you're a Red Cross volunteer, there's a great place for you and you're appreciated. If you're a YMCA guy, as a veteran who spent an awful lot of time in combat, we loved all the auxiliary people that helped us out, and we adopted them into our unit. But it didn't mean that they were servicemen or women, and it didn't mean they were veterans. So the community very clearly wanted to honor all those people, and that's why that plaque that has all the inclusive names was A, built, B, put in City Hall, and C, and most importantly in this case, not put on or near the memorial, on the monument. And I think that's a very, very important item to note. That plaque was made, and there was a deliberate decision to put it in a location not adjoining, not on, or not near the Veterans Monument, the Veterans Memorial, dedicated to the men of Carmel who served in World War I. And so no one is going to deny that all those people didn't do a great job, and recognition is important. And my recommendation at this point would be, let's have a group, if they're so inclined, make that plaque if it's lost and post it in City Hall or post it in some other auspicious location in the city to honor those people, but it doesn't belong on the World War I Veterans Memorial, on the Veterans Monument. And it's also no surprise that almost every single event, or many of the events that happen, to include what's going to happen this November, associated with this monument, this memorial, all took place on Veterans Day. It took place on Veterans Day because this is a veterans memorial, a veterans monument. The day that we honor veterans, not the day that we honor all the people that help veterans, and there's tons of them, or all the people that help a war effort or put themselves in harm's way. Those are important people, but they're not honored on Veterans Day. Yet many of the events surrounding this arch all take place to include this coming November on Veterans Day. And that's a very clear indicator of what the focus of this monument, this memorial is. And I think that we really have to keep that in mind. And if we allow, desires and wanting to include names just because of sex, gender, race, religion, or other orientation on here, then I think we're doing the disservice to the people that this monument was intended for. And I think that if we go against that plaque that talks about the men who served, it also goes against what the intent of this monument was about. And the city's had 100 years to rectify this mistake, if in fact it was a mistake. It's clear that it was not a mistake because it's not been changed, and there was a separate list of names honoring all those people that was put in a different place. So I think those things are very, very important to remember, and should, I think in many ways, trump a lot of the things that we've talked about here.
Okay.
I'd like to speak briefly.
Sure, Kathy.
We do honor the veterans every year. And when do we honor those other people?
We have many events that we do that. I mean, we have Memorial Day where we remember all people who have served in the armed forces, not just those people that died. We have days throughout the year where we remember all kinds of different things. And so, it's not a lump all together for Veterans Day.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Okay. I'll just state my feelings about this and thoughts. I guess from the beginning, I was a little bit concerned, as I mentioned in the first meeting, about the size of the plaque. And the more I hear about this, I'm beginning to not favor necessarily all of what Jordan said, but for example, the plaque that's there, I think was put in later and maybe not have the historic significance of it, but I don't see any evidence that there was an intent to place all the names at the memorial itself. I think I am in favor of going back maybe to the original design by Charles Sumner Green and have a new plaque placed on it that says, "To those who served," and then a plaque in the planter, which would be much smaller, describing what this is for. And I think Jordan makes a very good point that the plaque from Charles Sumner Green carving was in City Hall. And having something there, or as you say, another auspicious place of all the names that was listed makes sense. And maybe we just don't have every single name on the plaque that's at the monument itself. Because it does take a lot of room. There's no evidence that that was part of the history of that. So those are my comments. And
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I hear what you're saying. I certainly respect Jordan's point of view based on his background. However, the city is not a very good keeper of historic artifacts. We know that some things that were put in City Hall, like where is the bowl that was on here that Charles Sumner Green designed? If you get another plaque and put it somewhere else and there's a problem with the building, then it gets moved into storage and it's forgotten. I think Kathy made a very strong argument that we are honoring not only the veterans, which this doesn't say the veterans are excluded, but we're honoring them and the auxiliary members of the community. So I don't see a conflict between keeping this as proposed, because I would rather have this be in plain sight in the eyes of everyone rather than put off in City Hall or in a storage unit, or as the Sarah statue was lost. I mean, it's not lost, but I think it has not gone back to where it's supposed to be. We run the risk of things like that. And I think these gentlemen who have put this nomination in front of us have the right intention. They are not usurping past efforts. They are supporting them and moving them forward. And I don't see the conflict. I think we can honor those who served in any capacity. And this memorial is just like Carmel, very unique, very unusual, and this is the place where we should put our emphasis as far as World War I is concerned.
Thank you, Catherine.
I would even be in favor of making the plaque a little bigger to include everyone.
I think all the names are on there, though, in the present design. I would say, yeah, I think the clearest evidence, as Catherine said, I'll agree with her on some things too, was that the primary evidence of having the carving by Charles Sumner Green and then the Pinecone articles to support it makes me think that those names belong there. So I don't have the same issue with whether, and in fact, the actual calling it of a Veterans Memorial, I'm not sure if that has historic validity, since it was never referred to that. It seems to be during the times this was made in the early 20s and late teens. So I guess I just have since the names were not originally on the monument itself. The only thing I would say in regards to that, in support of what Catherine and Kathy are saying, and Carol, is that in terms of the Secretary of Interior standards, having a plaque that's independently supported in the planter, separated from the actual mass of the monument itself, I think keeps it independent and allows it to be removed at any point. So that's the one, certainly that's in its favor to do that. And I would say additionally, again, if we put this plaque in, then the original one that was put in later doesn't make a lot of sense. And I would be in favor of trying to replicate the original intent, which was to those who served on the main monument, which was, I think, I think it has to go through, and I'll let Brandon and Marnie respond to this, but regarding that plaque, if we're to remove any of the plaques and replace it with something, it has to go through at least a phase 2 evaluation. Is that correct, Brandon? Regarding
yes, Mr. Chair, you are correct, because we would be actually physically altering the monument itself. And if I could just sort of bolt on to where you were going with that, I did want to interject at some point. I think you nailed it, but the action before the HRB tonight is whether or not including all the names or only including names of veterans, if that would be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards, and if the historic character will be retained and preserved based on how the names are put on there. So I just want to make sure we always come back to that. What is the HRB considering? What's the action tonight? So that's really.
So can we ask another question then? What if we approve it at the application and terms, not approve it, but basically say it does meet the Secretary standards? Does this go to Planning Commission? Does this go to Council? What's the next step?
That's a great question. So Marty and I have had a conversation about that. At face value, based on the way the code is written, this would be approvable at the staff level administratively. However, I feel pretty strongly about when you have large public controversy, and controversy is maybe the wrong word, a significant amount of public involvement. I think there's oftentimes some wisdom in elevating these types of things to like a planning commission. So there's an additional public hearing on the actual design element of it, because there's the design permit that has to be approved as well. So you are giving staff the recommendation on the impacts to the historic resource, and then there's an approval of a permit that needs to happen either at the staff level, which is where it could go based on the code, or I have the authority to elevate that to the Planning Commission. So we are considering that as part of this.
Okay. Is there any questions to Brandon from the board about that? I think that's a very.
I have a question. To me, there is some urgency as expressed by the applicants in terms of having something ready for the 100th anniversary, which to me is fairly significant. And I don't know about sending it to another group that meets a month from now. If it can be approved at the staff level, I would be in favor of that. But I would also like Carol to remind us of her 3 points. And I think if she incorporates what she said into the form of the motion and the resolution, perhaps that would satisfy us that we could go forward.
If I could I'll tear off of that really quickly before Board Member Hall speaks, but thank you, Board Member Galtieri. So yes, it's ultimately at the discretion of the director. I certainly take the recommendation of the HRB very seriously. Part of the calculation is, how much involvement do we have? Where do we land on the disagreement, if there is any? But also taking into account that any decision of the HRB is also appealable to the City Council. So there's also that wrinkle. The decisions on of significance, of consistency, are appealable to the City Council. So we know that as well. So there's a bit of a calculation that takes place there as well.
I would think that's certainly an adequate place for it to go if someone decides to appeal it. But from what I've heard from the board, we are fairly unanimous in this, not quite, but I'd like to hear what Carol's resolution might be.
Carol? You want to? So I guess if there's no discussion.
Board Member Hall, I believe you're still muted. Sorry, Chair Dyer.
I was just going to say, it sounds like Catherine was requesting a motion from Carol, which is up to Carol to make that, or she can just make her points again. But you're welcome to make a motion if you want.
You are muted, Carol. Carol, you're muted.
I'm going to make my points again, rather than a motion per se, just to make sure Jordan has a chance to speak if he wants to. First is to change the verbiage from veterans to those who served, so that it's a little clearer that we're including more than just veterans in this. Second, that we
Carol, I want to understand that with you. Maybe we need to bring the plaque up again to understand exactly what you're recommending.
That was Richard, right, that had the plaque? Is he still with us?
Yes, I'll share it. If you want me to put it up again, I will.
I would like to, I think if the Planning Kit staff can, they have the application, they should, I don't know if that's.
Oh, do they have
available.
the new version of it? I don't know.
Marnie, do you have
No.
the new version?
Let me
No, I do not.
take a moment.
Okay,
Let's take a moment. There you go.
Okay.
Where would you do that?
Okay. Well, it says World War, maybe we don't need to change it. It says, in honor of those who served our country, in memory of those who died in that service, World War I Veterans Memorial. And the.
I think, can I mention something, Carol, just as
Sure.
I look at this? There seems to be space below the squared off sentence that talks about the rebuilding in 1977. I think bringing back the "and" in some form, in some small form, would maybe make sense. It certainly makes it more understandable. You say, in honor of those who served our country and in memory of those who died in that service. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay. And then the second point was to include in it the 61 names that Charles Sumner Green had on his plaque. And I don't know if the 56 names are only the veterans, and then he added 5 more. I don't know what the composition of that was, but I would honor his 61 names one way or the other, put them in the proper columns. And then 3, I would change all those descriptors of American Red Cross, Knights of Columbus, war correspondents, et cetera. Take that all out and just put a title in front of all those names that says auxiliary service, so that it clarifies that they are the auxiliaries and the others are the veterans, Army, Navy, and then auxiliary service, to clarify for sure that it isn't just the veterans that we're listing there. And so that's. And it would make more room, by the way, if you took out all of those titles, then you could make the names maybe a little more readable.
Okay.
I think it would be more meaningful if the titles stayed in.
Catherine, do you have a feeling on that?
To me, I think Carol makes a good point. I think it satisfies some of Jordan's concerns that the veterans aren't getting the full respect that they need here, which we do not want to lose at all. So I just, on this, I would disagree with Kathy. I think, yes, that would be significant, but I think we could also just call the auxiliary services. I think people don't really need to know exactly what they did, but that they were in service to the country.
Wonderful history.
Okay.
Sure, can I make a couple comments?
Go ahead.
Carol, I appreciate your comments and adjustments. For Catherine, let me make this very clear. I am not saying that we're not providing veterans with some uber elite acknowledgement that should go head and shoulders above everyone. I will call your attention to what this is, the World War I Veterans Memorial, as clearly outlined in this plaque. And when we say in honor of those who served our country, when we say served our country, we generally refer to people in the military service. Those other people provided service to our country, but they did not serve our country in the context that we normally take that to mean. And if you're casually reading this plaque and you say in honor of those who served our country, I would submit to you that the vast majority of people that are going to read that are going to associate that with military service. But if we do this, and I think we're absolutely wrong if we do, then we must remove the Veterans Memorial. because it's no longer a veterans memorial at that point. Then it's a memorial to everybody who did everything and, you know, and provided some form of service to the nation during that critical time. And again, I take nothing away for those people who did important work, but then it is no longer a veterans memorial. Let's remember who raised the funds for this. The post 512 American Legion. The American Legion was formed by veterans, had to exclusively be veterans who served during a period of war, and they raised this money and they built this memorial, this monument, to honor veterans. That's why it says the men who served, and that's why it's called the World War I Veterans Memorial, as clearly outlined on this plaque. You know, we can't mix apples and oranges on this. It's unfair to do, and it's not right to do. And it's very misleading if we try and do something in between. So that's what I would submit to the group.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board, or is there a motion?
Well, I guess we'll just have to go by the vote. I heard directly what Jordan said. I respect his opinion, but I see the historical record is right in front of me. Maybe the wording should not have veterans in it, which would be stupid. That would be wrong. We show the Army and Navy veterans, and I think just to say we cannot include auxiliary service members is too exclusive. I hear what veterans would say, but I think the wording that has been developed here, that we're honoring the men and women who served in the Great War and who came home alive, and they were from Carmel, and they all should be memorialized. And I think the problem is the word memorial, because some people will think they all died, but we can't prejudge what people are going to say. I don't have the full resolution here to vote on. I only have the first page, but I would make a motion then, if no one else wants to talk, that we approve the determination of consistency with the Secretary's standards and follow the resolution as it's been laid out with the agenda.
Mr. Chair, could I ask for clarification for staff, please?
Yes.
I know there was some content changes that were discussed. So Board Member Galtieri, does your motion include the addition of "and" in between the top two lines and changing the headers to read auxiliary services?
Yes.
Thank you.
Then for the state of correctness in this motion, if this motion is going to go forward, then you have to remove the word veterans, because you're no longer talking about veterans. If it's a veterans memorial and you have non-veterans in there, that is a disservice to veterans. And so you have to remove that word. You just make it the World War I memorial. And even that will be very misleading.
Well, I believe the Department of Parks and Recreation form that was filled out by Mr. Seavey to put this on the historic inventory calls this the historic name World War I Memorial Arch. And that's what we have in our record, that this is what he termed was the historic name. So I personally, it doesn't bother me to see the veterans are supporting this. The veterans have brought this forward. The Post is supporting it. I don't see removing the word veterans. I think that's now we're being we're breaking it up. That's all I can say.
I think if I just will add before I think I agree with Jordan, because I think the veterans is what's hanging us up, or a lot of us up on it. And I appreciate Catherine bringing up the original name, which was the World War I Memorial Arch. And if we keep these names, which were part of the original Charles Sumner Green plaque, which is a definitive historic record of it, I think I can see respecting Jordan's wish that the veterans be removed, because obviously it has a very strong and important meaning to that community. And
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I could interject, I believe at this point we only have a motion and we don't have a second. Typically, parliamentary procedure, you get a second before you discuss the motion.
I didn't know the motion was completely.
Well, all right, I can see what you're saying too, and if that works better, then my motion would include Carol's comments about the Charles Sumner Green names, the use of auxiliary services, and the removal of veterans from the fourth line. That would be my motion.
And to say World War Memorial Arch, right? World War I Memorial Arch.
Substitute, all right. Okay.
Okay, so the motion is now on the floor. So is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, roll call, please.
Board Member Croman?
No.
Board Member Galtieri?
Yes.
Board Member Hall?
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy?
I'm sorry, I had to step away for a moment. What is the motion?
The motion is to approve the plaque with the conditions that it be renamed to the World War I Memorial Arch, that the Charles Sumner Green names, the 61 names, be put on there, that the descriptors for the auxiliary people be removed, and it just have auxiliary and
auxiliary service.
Yeah, auxiliary service be put in, and I think that was and in between the two top lines.
Right.
Okay, I'll vote in favor of that.
Thank you. And Board Member Dyer.
I will vote yes.
Thank you.
So that it passes. I'll go back to mine. Now we move on to future agenda items. And the next regular meeting is Monday, September 20th. There's nothing else. Is there anything else from the director?
No, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.